Welcome back to the podcast and to today's episode. Today, I welcome Pankaj, where we're going to be talking about many things around what is mindful leadership and high performance and much, much more around those topics. So, just a quick introduction to Pankaj and then we'll dive in. So, Pankaj takes decision fatigue to clarity and high performance. In the world of leadership, it's stuck between two extremes. The high pressure leadership, where burnout, decision fatigue, and reactivity hinder long-term success. Traditional mindfulness training often detach from the real-world decision making that leaders face daily. There is a better way though, and that is through Leadership Master Compass. And Pankaj helps executives, entrepreneurs, and leadership teams master mindful decision making, reduce stress, and increase leadership clarity, all while delivering high performance results. So, welcome to the show today, Pankaj. Glad to have you on with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, first of all, be really interesting to hear your story, maybe your kind of your background that's got you focusing on leadership and high performance.
Um, yeah, sure. So it all dawned on me in during COVID 2020 October. We had a ransomware attack, a full-blown ransomware attack, and I was a chief technology officer. But with the team, both leadership team as well as my direct reports and everyone, our vendors and partners, we were able to come out of that in less than 40 hours without paying any ransomware. So as being a big event, and that too during COVID, I was invited on many webinars and conferences to talk about what happened, what was the experience, and how we went through it. After the fifth one, I started thinking about something that came to me very naturally to be able to get through the situation. Why it is such a big deal that people are asking me how I made decisions or how I kept calm or how I do this. And I started reflecting back in my life, right? And what I saw was that was not the first instance where I was able to turn around the ship in a very short time. It had happened multiple times with me. So, two things that really came out of that reflecting. One was at age 14, because of my aggressive nature, I was put under 2.5 months training with a Lama in mindful practices. This is when I was kid, 14 years old, right? And always stayed with me. And everything that I have done in my life, I never used the word mindful, but I have led my life like that. At age 24, I was one of the principals in a large capital firm here in US, and I was given responsibility of taking over a new manufacturing unit that we just acquired. We acquired the acquisition went fine, and I came there on Tuesday. Friday was the payroll day. Because of some clerical error, the bank refused to encash the checks. Now, this is 300 blue collar people in a small little town where I was the only colored person. So the news spread like fire, and knowing the temperament of the workers there, the sheriff was kind enough to stop by and see if he can help in any way to control the crowd. But what I did instead was on the back end, I was already working with the bank to get the checks cleared and everything because we knew that we had so much investment in this company and there's a plan out there. But when he came, I said, okay, I'm new to this place. I don't know many people, but because you have come to help me, can you call five, six, seven different restaurants and see if they can cater food here in such a short notice? So in next 45 minutes, that chaos of 300 families coming to the facility to ask if their jobs are secure or not, I was able to turn that into a feast, right?
Mm.
And not only that incident, I was blessed as I grew in my ranks through Fortune 100 companies, through non-profit organizations or venture capital. I was able to build very effective and very high-performing team that never had any burnout. Every individual, about 300, 400 people that I have touched over my career, they all are very successful. And they still, most of them, they still follow the practices that I have taught them. But it was never formal training that, hey, you have to do this, right? So simple things like whenever I would start my meeting, The first minute, I would ask everyone just to take deep breath, 4 deep breath, and just write down what do you want out of this meeting individually. And then we will look as a group, what do we want out of this meeting even before the meeting starts, right? 30 seconds to do that. But what we just did, we just got into the autopilot and turned it off and brought everybody's presence there, right? And
Mm.
interestingly enough, in 2022, 2022-23, a report was issued recently by Deloitte saying that more than 90% of the leaders, when the meeting start, they're not present mentally in the meeting for the first 10 minutes. Think
Wow.
about that. Think about that in the terms of productivity, how big of a loss it is. And if you come down to a personal level, you're insulting people around you by not being present and listening to them, right? You expand that into our relationship. You expand that into our families, right? With everybody scrolling all the time.
Mm.
You're talking to someone, they're still, are you really interested in me having conversation with you if you're scrolling,
Mm.
right? So because the autopilot is such a dangerous thing, and brain is the laziest organ in our body. The moment it gets an opportunity, it will go in autopilot because it does not want to work, right? So these quick 30 seconds breathing exercise helps you to cut off that autopilot, right? The moment you do that, your prefrontal cortex, which is your intelligent brain, comes into action,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
The the problem also is when you're in autopilot, other problem that we have since COVID or even before that, it has become that much more aggressively spreading since COVID, is we are 24/7 living in fight and flight mode, right?
Yeah.
So when amygdala in our brain is responsible for fight and flight mode, when it comes into action, it shuts down rest of the body because it tries to preserve every single ounce of energy for surviving, right? Now think about it. You're lying down in your bed or lying down on your couch, you're scrolling. That digital thing is causing your amygdala to think that it is survival mode, right? But you are relaxing physically. So the physical adaptation of our body is not there with the brain. And that's why people are always fatigued. People are always tired. People are always upset. They're always stretched. Even if somebody sleeps for 10 hours, comes out and asks them, how are you doing? They're not doing well. And that is because we have to start dropping. And that's why for year 2025, my target is to get this 1 minute micro practice to 250,000 people on this planet.
Wow. So yeah, the 1 minute like sounds very like actionable as well, because often when you think of like mindfulness, you think it's got to be a long, complicated like routine,
Mm.
like maybe like a long yoga class or like a 2 hour breathwork session or something. But this sounds like it's just a very simple practice.
Yeah, I was telling somebody in the last podcast that I have found ways to sneak behind our psychology and limitations. So the biggest limitation today in the digital age is because of the way social media and advertisement and everything works,
Mm.
a normal human span of focus is less than 12 seconds right now.
Mm.
3 years back, it used to be 38 seconds. 8 years back, it used to be about a minute. So if you think about that, if you see every day, the time of the advertisements are shrinking because they have to match the span of focus that a human brain can accommodate, right? So I had to come up with these practices, micro practices, to give to people that takes less than 12 seconds to initiate, to have that experience. Now, once you start doing that 3, 4, 5 times a day, now you are actually making effort to make your prefrontal cortex work. When you start doing that, that's when you can go back and expand your focus time,
Wow.
right? I mean, think about it. I work with people, I work with leaders. AI is a very good example where yes, there is no harm. Anybody who is not using artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're doing injustice to themselves. They should be using it. But
Mm,
the question is, did you just write a prompt and take the answer, whatever you got, or did you actually go through it and try to create the context,
mm,
right? It AI and machine learning is nothing but a small baby that's born. It will not have the intelligence unless it is trained,
mm.
right? So if you suddenly open a prompt and type something and ask for a result, you're not going to get that answer, right? But then that's where the limitation that we have created in human conscious to be not present, right? The simple thing I just told you, anybody in your listeners, if you, and you should also try this. What I tell people is put a random alarm in your phone 6 times a day, right? And whenever the alarm goes off, irrespective of, unless you're driving, of course, you don't do it. But if you're not driving and sitting around, I want you to think what work you are doing and what is your expectation to get out of that work, and how do you feel about that, and write just one single sentence less than 12 words. This is another big hack, right? When you do this 6 times in a day, your brain is not focused on giving you answers. You're pushing your prefrontal cortex in the moment to get the answer. So the exercise, if you do 6 times a day, in 6 days, it's 36 statements. And end of 6 days, 7th day, take out those 36 statements and just read aloud to yourself. You will see underlying emotional challenges that you have created in your life.
Wow. And then diving into those a little bit more.
Right. And then that's where I always talk about the leadership mastery compass, where the first piece of the compass is presence power. How can you create presence power? Right. So you put the alarm, you created presence power, you wrote a statement, right? Why it is important to do that? Because with becoming present, you get clarity in managing your own emotions, in understanding your own emotions, right? An activity that we do in a day is nothing but an embodiment of intelligence and emotions coming together, right? Your intelligence is giving you cognitive thought process. Your emotion is giving you the relationship in that work with your attitude, with your behavior, with whatever resonating with you, right? So if you put focus on the present, you get agility of managing your emotion. You get clarity cognitively to be able to make decisions. When you do that, every action you take is going to be compassionate, right? And it starts with you. It starts with me. It starts here. I have to be present first to be able to understand what I am bringing in front of you. And then I have to make sure that I can get you comfortable enough to be able to digest what I'm saying,
Mm,
right? I mean, I always say when you mentioned mindful, yes, if I have to, I have videos on my site. People can go and download those 45 minutes breath work exercise and asanas and stuff like that. But that is not what I teach here. What I tell people is let's start with micro exercises because it's time for us to rewire our brains,
mm. So it
right?
start,
And right,
so it
right.
starts with just becoming aware of yourself. That's the first part.
Mhm. And that's where another good tool is stop. I mean, especially here in US, I give this out to high school kids when they start learning driving. That next time you get to a stop sign, you have to stop for 16 seconds. That's law. So what do you do in that 16 seconds so you cannot rush, right? So stop. Think about the last thought that came to you. Observe the way emotions manifested in your body when you thought that, right? Put a name
Mm,
to that interaction of emotion and thought and move on. Psychologically and biologically, what's happening is my podcast tomorrow. I have named it um, list it or lose it. So if you don't name your emotions, your brain does not recollect that it is an emotion of fear or it is an emotion irrelevant to you, because you are in autopilot all day long. If you're in autopilot all day long, you're not responding to your emotions. You're
Mm.
controlled by them,
Mm.
right? And when you're controlled by your emotion, your brain is thinking this is a natural thing for you. No, that's not a natural thing for us. That is not a natural thing for human. The natural thing for human being is to be able to control our emotions,
Mm. So by
right?
writing down what you're doing, like mindfully, and your decisions, it tells it's kind of getting that brain more alert to what is going on right now.
Right.
Okay.
It starts breaking that autopilot.
Mm.
Like I always have this joke with people. When somebody says, "Oh, I'm always present, I'm always active," my first question will be, "What does your commute look like every day?" And they will say XYZ, whatever it is, and say, "Okay, how many buildings are there from point A to point B? Can you name every single building?"
Mm.
You went through 20 buildings, you would know what each building looked like, right? You go for a walk in your community, you go for a walk in your neighborhood. Do you remember the color of the door of every building? Do you remember the color of the door of every house?
Very rarely, if anyone, very rarely. Mm.
Right? That's my point. That's my point. When people say, "Oh, I remember what I had in the morning," I said, "Okay, what did you have? Cereal, biscuit, milk, coffee, whatever it is." My next question will be, "How did it taste like?" 80% of the time, I don't get an answer.
Mm. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I
Right?
wouldn't be able to answer you some of those times. Yeah, I
Mm.
got you.
Right. So that's another big fallacy of our life today, that we spend a lot of time in non-existential stuff, things that are fictitious to us. Past is a fiction. Even if we recollect, the best of us can recollect maybe 25% of what exactly happened at a time, at a moment in time, not more than that, right? So whatever you are living in that you think happened with you, it's 80% lie anyway. Why are you wasting your time with that?
Mm. That's super interesting with what you're saying about like just observing things or like well you're talking about doors and noticing things. I know when I've got into those states of like really right I'm making an intention to really mind just even mindfully walk now and not listening to some kind of even like growth. I typically listen to a lot of growth on the go and stuff like that, whether it's Tony Robbins or whatever, but it's
Mhm.
like when I'm just like consciously walking, I've noticed myself noticing things which have always been there, but I haven't noticed have been there. It's so fascinating.
So the other part of that conversation around being in past is when people do mistake of start contemplating future. Again, the future does not exist. You are just creating. I always uh, give this metaphor to people. What happens with us is we create our own imagination, starts creating a big building in our head. It takes a lot of time to build that building, and then we start visiting that building. And when we start living in that building for a long time, then we have to pay rent of that building, and those rent gets paid to a psychologist. So when you live enough in that fictitious life of yours and try to imagine things from there, it does not exist. You're not present, so you don't even know what's happening. And that's why now you'll have to pay rent to a psychologist. Then you can stop living that just by a simple breath. Start focusing on your breathing, become in present.
Mm,
Right? Think about, we as human, we spend so much time wasting in past that we cannot recollect, future that does not exist. And the very beautiful experience, minute by minute experience of our life, we're missing that.
mm. So the breath's a vital part for you. for the mindfulness.
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Sorry, so the breath's a vital part.
Breathing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the very finite thing that is the common element of our life is the breath, right? If a baby is born, the first thing that happens is inhalation. And when that baby dies, as a man or a woman or whoever at whatever age, the last thing that happens is exhalation.
Mm.
It's a little bit philosophy also, a little bit science also. So the point of saying is the difference between our life and death is one breath. Have we ever stopped, sat down, and experienced one full breath? And that's where the magic starts. That's where that 30 seconds exercise starts with a simple box breathing. Take a deep breath with 4 counts, pause it for 4 counts, exhale for 4 counts, and again pause it for 4 counts. But when you inhale, see where you're feeling the air going through your nostrils, all the different parts of your organ. When you hold it, see where the actual air is holding. You will actually, if you do it 5 to 6 times, you will actually feel your lungs is not what holds your breath. Your lung just purifies and then it exhales and it manifests differently in every body. And that's what we have to understand and learn. If you do it 4 times, you have just cut down your autopilot by 30 seconds. You actually have invested time in your prefrontal cortex to grow it back.
4 times, did you say?
Yeah. So it's a 4 for 16, right?
Yeah.
So
Ah,
you
got you.
inhale for count of four,
Oh, the
exhale for
box
count of four.
breathing. Yeah, box
Yeah,
breathing.
box breathing. So you do 4 times.
Mm.
So that's a full cycle of 4 boxes. And that is the very first step for anyone. That's the micro exercise I talk about. Like the stop of a stilling. That's a micro exercise I talk about. Anytime you go, so here's another thing. Digital detoxification, right? If people really want to work on digital detoxification, all you have to do is get in a habit of asking 3 simple questions. Whatever activity you're going to do, ask question, what are you going to get out of that activity? The second question, if you were not doing this activity, who else could be doing it?
Mm.
And third question, if I was not doing this, what else I could be doing? And just with these 3 questions, I have after list of teachers and principals from high schools telling how they got their kids off of digital devices in the school. Just by those three
Mm.
simple questions.
Wow. Like 6 times through the day.
Mhm.
Mm. And that's combined with the breathing.
You can do it with breathing or without breathing.
Yeah.
If you combine with breathing, you actually present, you get to think more. But
Yeah.
even if you're not breathing, you should definitely challenge your brain to say, okay, what the hell I'm doing right now.
Mm. Got you. Man, that's no, it's super interesting. You can get like kids just off of devices in that way by breathing in a different way, which is super powerful. I love that.
Mhm.
For you, with like, do you ever find any kind of resistance in people doing like these exercises? Because particularly maybe for like achievers or people wanting to do fast,
Mhm.
do you ever come across any sort of like resistance to the mindful aspect?
So the initial woo is always that now this guy is going to have me pull out a yoga mat or turn twist my body in 300 different ways or
Yeah.
have me go to a retreat somewhere. None of those. And again, I mean, I was one of those high achievers. I was one of those, dog eat dog kind of leader that had grown everyone. But then there is a point in understanding the cyclical nature of the universe,
Mm.
right? The cyclical nature of the universe is that everything runs on cycle. Earth, moon, life, everything. So we as human also have a cycle. We have a cycle to rest and restore, and then we have cycle to move on through the
Mm,
day, right? That's why if you look at the system, it's designed. I always say human body is one of the most sophisticated engineering device on the planet, the way it is made. But what we do is because we are so hung up on push, 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 we are not giving our brain and our body that recharge time in the day, right? And again, it always starts with those minute, small micro practices. And I would not say that, yes, people come on the call with me, okay, let me see what you will give me. And I just start with, why don't we do just quick one box exercise? And then we can go into your questions because I can only understand what your questions are if you're coming like that strapped on. Uh, and then 85, 90% of the time, my first question back to them is, what was your most fulfilling day in life so far?
mm,
Right? And I go like two or three why behind that, why behind that, why behind that. 100% of the time. Not money, it's not wealth, it's not house, it's not car.
mm,
Right? It's not wealth, it's not money, it's none of those things that fulfilled you. Right? So let's figure out what fulfills you because the fulfillment is where the true joy of your life is.
mm,
You want to be hard charging? Let me show you. I can make you even 20% hard charging more than you are today. But for that, you will have to slow down to speed up,
mm.
right? Are you speeding up on the right track? There are
Oh,
places to make up time, but are you speeding up on the right tracks? If not, then you are just going against the wind that's going to stop you.
I love that. Slow down the speed up.
Mhm.
It's easy to, yeah, just get into that like competition all the time and be like, right, I've got to go as quick as I can. And really the benefits of slowing down as you demonstrated there,
Mhm.
and shared there. Um, yeah, Pankaj, yeah, I just wondered before we wrap up really today, if there's me, I know you've got a podcast which is really valuable for the listener to check out that actually give some of these tips that we've been talking about to actually practically use. We've been talking about
Mhm.
it a lot today, so yeah, the practically for I'm always a big fan of practical guidance and tips. So it sounds like that's definitely something you can give. So where can the listener find that if they want to get your podcast or any of your other resources as well, like you mentioned about breathwork? And
Yeah.
is there anything you'd like to leave us with today?
Yeah. So first of all, uh, my podcast is telecasted live every Tuesday noon Pacific
Mm,
on the Transformation Network. Uh, Folks can also find out podcasts as well as other resources on singleadership.com,
awesome.
SINGH leadership.com. And based on the feedback I have gotten on the podcast, I'm actually releasing another book of micro exercises, Mindful Pivot, in late March, early April, which is going to be free of cost to everyone. It's just consolidated by different emotional feelings that a person can have in a day, and there are micro practices for each of those. So I'm looking forward to launch that. The one thing that I will leave you and the listeners with is life is not as complicated as we make. Life is
Mm,
as simple as the breath that we take. What I mean by that, anyone who is listening right now, I can guarantee then when was the last time they self-inspected their breath or their heart or their lungs, right? It is all on autopilot because your body is running, right? What will be the fun that you can experience if you can take out 1 minute out of 24 minutes or 24 hours in a day, actually feel what is running you,
mm,
to get out of autopilot and actually feel all the engines and vessels that is actually running you moment by moment. And you become part of that. That's the excitement. that people should look forward to.
Love it. And tell your excitement and being able to live that life and that awareness and not be controlled by your emotions as you're touching on is a very powerful place. So for the listener, you can find Pankaj's resources linked in the show notes below. So once again, a big thank you for coming on today and sharing everything you have.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So that concludes our episode for today. And remember to lead with your heart and not with fear.